Would you like to have your query letter critique, but you don't want to pay to have that happen? It can be done for free, but it will be public out here on all my socials. My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. Information on how to submit will be at the end of the video, but please remember there is a real live person on the other side of this query. So while I am going to endeavor to be constructive in my feedback and not destructive, everybody be nice in the comment section and nobody tell them to just self-publish. That's not how this works. Let's jump in. I am a YA fantasy author interested in representation for Sigyn, the first installment of a 3-part series. My writing background is fantasy-centered, mixing horror and comedy elements, and my latest manuscript combines the fun-loving characters of Percy Jackson with a gritty take on Norse mythology told from the villain's perspective. Whew. Okay, so usually author bio stuff is going to go down at the end. The only time I would recommend like putting it up here is if it is like incredible. If you were like, I have been published 12 times with HarperCollins and my agent and I have split ways and I am looking for a new agent, right? Like that would be something that's worth putting up here. But if you're just like, I have written other things that I also think are fun, that's not usually good enough to take up like top billing up here. Percy Jackson also was sold as middle grade and this is sold as YA. That's maybe a little bit of a quibble. Let's keep going. Other works that have influenced this writing include Lucifer, Supernatural, and Marvel movies. As an avid mythology nerd, my take on the stories emphasizes embracing the unknown and recognizing what we fear and do not understand to create a better reality for ourselves. So I recommend not using a lot of themes in a query letter because they end up just sort of falling flat. Without knowing what the story is and without caring about the character, this kind of means nothing to me. And I also am now a little bit concerned because there's a couple of like Norse mythology YA book series out right now, but you're comping to Percy Jackson, which came out close to 20 years ago now, and then a bunch of TV shows that are like, we've got a little bit of Norse mythology over here, and like it sort of like touches on some mythology characters, but you're using a bunch of non-book wrong category blockbuster, like you're using a bunch of stuff as comp titles or in place of comp titles that indicate that you don't know much about what the current market is doing. Because Norse mythology in particular is having a bit of a moment in the YA and NA spaces. There's kind of a lot of it out there. All right, so then we have Sigyn, the Jotunheim Saga Book 1. I don't know that you need to include that. That's just the title of your book. When the wolf is mysteriously killed on the slopes of a ski resort in a small town in Norway, curious Jess suspects the resort owner is to blame. Despite her persistence, her father and sister refuse to believe her, chalking it up to her imagination. Taking matters into her own hands, she convinces the owner, Sigyn, to hire her at the resort in a plot to reveal her criminal activity. So we've got some pronoun misplacement here. So by referring to her, I think you're referring to Jess, but then her here is referring to Sigyn. So we've got a little bit of like a grammar issue here. But okay, we've got what feels more like a murder mystery rather than a fantasy mythology, but let's keep going. The more time Jess spends at the lodge, the more questions she has. What is the strange language Sigyn whispers to her assistant? What are the alien symbols in her journal? Why is it that when Jess looks into her eyes, she sees something not quite human staring back? Most importantly, why is she not afraid? I have talked a lot recently about rhetorical questions in query letters, and this is why I advise against them. This person has used 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in one paragraph here. And when you use one rhetorical question, most agents and editors will go, oh, okay. Because a lot of people will submit a query letter like this where they've got 4 of them in one paragraph. And unfortunately, this went along with somebody who has indicated pretty clearly that they don't know what the market is doing right now. So you can see how this starts to feel like this comes from a person who hasn't done basic research on query letters. These can all be rephrased in a way that makes them not rhetorical questions, that makes them feel much more active. So Jess overhears Sigyn whispering in a strange language to her assistant and finds alien symbols in her journal. It doesn't need to be listed as these questions. You can just make these as statements. These are things Jess found. And when Jess looks into her eyes, she sees something not quite human staring back. That's also not super helpful. This is not super concrete, but we're getting closer. And why is who not afraid? Why is Jess not afraid? Does she have a reason to be afraid? Well, this last one down here, it gives us nothing. I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know what they're supposed to be afraid of. This needs to be fixed. Jess realizes there is more to the mountain in Sigyn herself, and I should know how to pronounce fantasy names. I don't know why I do this to myself. I will always get them wrong. I'm sorry. And to Sigyn herself than what others can see. You can yank that off of there. There's more to the mountain implies there is more than meets the eye. There is more than we can see. She dives headfirst into a world of Nordic folklore, but there is good reason for the veil between myth and reality. It is far darker than the fairy tales she loves to write. So why is she a sleuth or is she a writer? And like dropping, she can be both obviously, but like dropping this major trait here at the end feels a little disorienting. You have not shown us the magic in a fantasy story here, so I know we've got a little bit of folklore, the veil between myth and reality, but is the myth actually reality? Is that part of the magic of the story? I think down here is a lot of your stakes, and you've got them kind of buried with all of this other murder mystery stuff, because you said this was a fantasy, but this feels like a pretty standard, like Nancy Drew sleuth story. Segan is not alone. Her past has caught up with her, and it's calling for her blood. This sounds like this person is your protagonist. Like this is the person who's got a problem to solve, and just I'm genuinely confused. If I were receiving this completely as a cold query, I would assume that you wrote a story here with this person as the protagonist and then realized that you wanted it to be a YA book, and so you used Jess as the eyes to move through the story and you added that on to make it be YA. But the way you have pitched this feels like a Nancy Drew sleuth. That is complimentary, by the way. That is that's a very popular subgenre, is to have these like teen detective sleuth stories. I don't see a lot of even the stakes down here feels like a thriller, murder mystery, suspense story, not a fantasy story. You haven't really tapped into the magic, and I don't want a lot of world building, but you don't have a lot of it in here in a way that feels really immersive and feels really important. So 5 questions. Who is our main character? Jess, I guess. What is it that she wants to link this resort owner to the murder that happened, to the supposed murder that happened? What is she willing to do to get in there and be a teen sleuth? What is standing in her way? That's unclear. I'm not sure if it is the supernatural element that is standing in her way. Did this person actually commit the murder? Is Jess just sniffing up the wrong tree entirely? I don't know what's standing in her way. And what happens if she fails? Totally missing from this. I don't know. Is the monster going to strike again? Is it a monster? Is it a real person? Is it... I don't know what happens if Jess fails. In fact, you pivot right at the very end and make it about somebody else entirely. And so that leads me to believe that Jess has been barking up the wrong tree this whole time. The story is not going to resolve Jess's story, and we're going to go off on this other tangent instead. That's what this feels like right now. So I recommend making sure that you know for sure what genre you are writing in, and make sure that you have the actual right main character that you are pitching this story based off of, and then like write this all to be much more active with your character making decisions, not wondering out loud what's going to happen. If you would like to submit, information on how to do so is in the link tree in my bio underneath the query critique submissions. If you do not want to do this publicly, that is totally understandable. I actually have a couple of openings here in December and January for some query critiques. I had a big client cancellation, and so I've got some holes to fill up in my schedule. Otherwise, it will be all the way out until like the end of April after these couple of openings that I've got here. If you do not want to pay for my editing services, you can buy my class. That is available underneath the series button on TikTok or underneath the collections on